This is Media Philosophy, exploring the deeper side of men's rights activists, one of the more interesting groups, because I'm not even sure if they're a political group, a social group, or whatever, because unlike other groups like feminists or other minority groups like the NAACP, the men's rights activists don't seem to have a very either clear mission or base. And what I mean by that is when you look at something like feminism, you can see that each one of the members have something in common. And this can really be shown through the Me Too movement. It doesn't matter if you're the highest paid CEO who's a woman, or the lowest seamstress at some company, or just some woman walking on the street. There are a few shared experiences that for women, things like catcalling, being judged based on their looks, natural pains like the pain of childbirth, period pains, menopause. There are so many common experiences that link women together that it doesn't seem that men have that same connection between us. And that's why the men's rights activists sometimes just don't have that mainstream appeal, because not all men are going through the same thing that these MRAs complain about. Again, you see this in the Me Too movement, where high achieving celebrities, businesswomen, actors, artists, whatever, all coming forward, being objectified, being victimized, being used and abused by men in positions of power. And this is such a common feeling, such a common experience for so many women. But on the flip side, what common experience do men have that we can all share across our lives that either involve shame or pain or victimization? There's not many, because, and it might be controversial to say this, but I would still say that the men are the mainstream, that men mostly are still in charge of things, whether you want to call it the patriarchy or not. It does seem, when you look around at leadership positions, when you look around in government, you mostly see men. And not that there is an issue with that inherently. There's different motivating factors for men and women that probably lead them to seek out certain positions. But again, when trying to gain some big coalition of men's rights or whatever, it's just hard to make the case that there is an issue. And you can see this when you start looking at the MRA's sort of maybe list of demands or grievances, whatever you want to call them. I would say that the big ones that I can think off the top of my head involves discrimination within the school system, the inequality in the dating scene, and circumcision. There's more than that, and some of them you could probably combine with those three, but I would say those are the three main things, again, that come to my head. Some discrimination here and there. Out of those, though, I would say that the circumcision is going to be the most... is going to be the issue that you could probably win the most people over with after the initial weird awkwardness hump of the conversation, but we'll get to that later. So the first big gripe that men's rights activists have is with the education system. They say it's for women, that it's against men, that men are set up to fail, and they will point to statistics like the growing number of women getting degrees compared to the falling number of men getting degrees, number of women within the teaching positions within schools, and then just how it seems young girls succeed much more over young men within primary school, high school, whatever. And I think a lot of these, when you really break it down, have simple explanations. So first, when it comes to there being more women in the education field than men, men seem to seek out higher paid positions where it seems generally women care more about themselves or what they're giving back. They might be more dream driven, whatever, but there is a lack of financial motivation for teaching, which is obvious. Anybody who's ever stepped inside of America for 2 seconds knows how underfunded the education system is. And so it seems that men will go towards more high-paying positions that might be able to let them buy toys or whatever, where it seems that, as a whole, women care more about relationships. So it's not so much that the education system is only hiring women, it's more that women put themselves into these low-paying helping roles for whatever reason. I can't make overgeneralizations, but whether you look at social work, whether you look at teaching majors, whether you look at nursing, which probably makes the most out of all the helping professions, but still, when you look at all these helping positions, their professions, how these helping professions, they're dominated by women, and it's not some conspiracy. Any man can go out and become a teacher. You can apply, even though you'll go online and read stories of people who'll claim that they were teaching assistants or going to school to be teachers, and that they were always looked weird, or that they were discriminated against. And I had lots of male teachers, not the majority. I mean, it happened more in high school. But you can't let other people's perception of you stop you from pursuing those kind of jobs. I guess there is another valid complaint that some men have, is that society can look at male caregivers negatively. And that may have been true maybe even 5 years ago. But as more men take active roles with their children, I don't see this anymore. I don't see people getting called on, I don't see people getting the cops called them at parks anymore for just being a man with their babies or anything like that. I don't see women confronting men with their babies or anything like that anymore. So maybe in the 90s, early 2000s, sure, when the gender roles were much more strictly enforced, maybe men were discouraged from working with children, being dads or whatever, but I don't see that anymore. So again, when it comes to this whole gripe that there's more women in the helping profession, maybe at one point men were kicked out or pushed out at one time. I can see that. I think I can concede that at one time it probably was hard, but to be fair, there was a time where only women were allowed to do that job, and that goes all the way back to what I'm talking about when it comes to just feminism and that common thread where our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, they were restricted to what kind of jobs that they were allowed to do. Historically, maybe they could only be nurses, teachers, switchboard operators, secretaries, whatever. So you can't really blame that there's so many women in this position when that's all they were able to do 60 years ago. And yeah, maybe we're just paying for those consequences now. But again, that's not women's fault. If anything, that was the status quo's fault. We won't call it the patriarchy. We'll call it the status quo, because the status quo does seem to want to push gender norms, at least back then. But anyways, it was the status quo's fault that put us in this situation now. We can crawl our way out of it, but I don't think you can blame women for accepting a profession with open arms that allowed them to make money and to actually get out in the community. So that's the first one. There's the historical context that kind of makes a lot, and that's the issue with a lot of men's rights. It seems like grievances is that there's either like historical or social dynamics or economic dynamics that kind of invalidate their points when you go on the surface. And that's the thing, like on the surface, okay, this is almost, it's like a lasagna ridiculousness with men's rights activists, because on the surface, it seems like they have no grievances, that men rule the world, but then they give you another argument where you're like, wow, this is so messed up, the world is against men, but then you go down like one more layer and you're like, no, wait, maybe this is just sort of the consequence of how society's been for so long. Because then we have the next issue, and that is just the dating dynamics. And this is where I find the men's rights activists to lose a lot of their credibility, is when they adopt a lot of these dating inequality stories. it really makes the whole movement seem so juvenile. Because again, there are some issues that really do affect men primarily, such as homelessness. That's another thing that is very legitimate that doesn't get brought up enough. But then when you start bringing up like the fact that on dating websites, women only want to go for the top X% of men. That's just one of those statistics that I always hear on these men's rights activists, forums or whatnot, is about like the hypergamy and wanting to date up. And of course you're always going to want to date up. If I was able to, I'm going to try to get someone maybe a little bit more attractive, maybe someone who is willing to take care of me or whatever. That just makes sense. Again, it's just if you have options and people are coming to you with different pitches, you're going to try to be a little bit more selective. And I think that it is unfair that maybe some men don't get a foot in the door. But again, we as a society have replaced friends with these online forums and whatnot. Because in the past, there's always been these sort of dating inequalities. I think I heard a statistic, of course, who knows if this is real, that basically it goes that the majority of women throughout history have had babies, while the vast minority of men have babies. And that's probably because many die by going to war or whatever. Either way, dating inequality has always existed. Women, because they have been so dependent on men for so long, society has sort of programmed them to kind of look out for themselves in terms of these relationships. I mean, a relationship with somebody is a big commitment. And let's be real, I mean, it's funny because some men's rights activists will use the same argument to justify like what do women bring to the table. But again, it is a partnership, and I think that's what a lot of these really extreme feminism discussions and really extreme men's rights discussions forget, is that relationships are a partnership. It's what each other bring to each other, and it's not just having a vagina, it's not just bringing a paycheck. It should be more than that. But online discussions have really polarized the whole dating sphere, and I think that comes down to there just being a lack of friends nowadays. Because in the past, you would still meet other girls and other people of the opposite sex out and about, maybe even a little bit of online dating. But when you would approach these people maybe out and about, you would be with your friends. So when the guy still got shut down, people act like women being mean to getting approached randomly is some big new phenomenon. But no, women being mean to men approaching them have been a common thread through history forever. Women need a defense mechanism against all the unsolicited offers they get probably on a weekly basis, and unfortunately you kind of have to be a little bit mean to get your point across. But in the past, you would return to your friends and they would dog on you a little bit. They would probably make you feel a little bit bad, but it would be all in good friend and you'd still be with your friends. But now, because we've lost the friendship aspect so heavily, those rejections can hurt extra because you don't have that support system cheering you on behind you or maybe making you laugh afterwards. And that's very sad. And I think a lot of these men's rights activists are just younger people who are lonely, who maybe they think society has cast them aside. And again, when you have those feelings, you can't argue against sentiments like that, because you can point to a lot of things that would really make you believe that, yeah, the world is against you. But at the very end of the day, what I think women are so good at, and that men, including myself, I don't know what about men are, we just seem to resist community. We resist building that community. And that's what women are so good at. Nobody created Me Too with an idea to get famous or rich or whatever. I couldn't even tell you who the first person to post that hashtag is. But because it resonated with so many people, so many women, they were able to come together and build that community, that support network. But men don't want to talk about their issues, and I guess that's another grievance that men would have, is that they say that society doesn't want to hear their issues. But here's the thing. Society is made up of people. Us men need to care about other men. We can't just rely on women to care for us because they can't empathize with our issues. Even though a lot of men's rights activists, I feel like, get mad at women for not maybe empathizing or taking their issues seriously. I mean, how often is the male gender as a whole taking women rights, women issues seriously? Because it's not our job. I mean, again, as the status quo has put men more in charge, we do have more of a responsibility to help women out and other minority groups, but you can't rely on women to shoulder the major load. I don't know what these men's rights activists are looking for when they say that, they come out emotionally to some woman and now they're kind of like feel that the woman's disgusted by them now. You hear that story commonly, that, they came out and cried to their girlfriend, their friends, and yeah, that's a good story to tell. But again, online, you just have to doubt the validity of these accounts because, one, we're not getting the full story or anything like that, and two, I mean, that's just a bad reflection on that one person, as in if a woman is rejecting someone emotionally just because they're sad, then that is a reflection on how they're a bad person and not a reflection on the female sex as a whole. Because I don't see so many women, I don't believe that someone that you are together with for so long is just gonna be disgusted if you open up. But let's say, hey, whatever, women are just naturally disgusted by male tears or whatever, that it's literally just a permanent turn off that you can't fix from there on out. Let's just say that it's just a fact of nature. We men should feel comfortable going to other men for these issues, for these pains. And it just seems like, as a whole, these men's rights activists find it more productive to go online and complain about what they're lacking or what society fails them than trying to go out and make connections within their community, within other men. Because again, we're just so individualistic as men. And it's sad because we do have so much power, and I feel like we have so much fun when we are together, even if it is just building some sort of project. There's that old saying that women are so good at just being together and just existing, where men need that project. And I don't think that is a diss on men. It's just maybe we just need to come together and find some really positive project that we can work on. Building handicap ramps for people's houses or whatever as the elderly age. I just think that men's rights activists would be taken more seriously instead of complaining online. They just actually came together to do something with each other, and I think that's going to cure a lot of the ails that they're experiencing. And then I got to wrap this video up soon. So I want to quickly brush on the whole circumcision aspect of the male rights activists. And again, I think that's where they're going to have the most success. But because everything that an MRA sort of touches in that label, the MRA label has already, like I said, been tainted. It's a little juvenile. Their members can kind of be a little extreme. So if the anti-circumcision crowd wants to be taken seriously, which again, I can see what their point is. Female genital mutilation has their own very graphic name, female genital mutilation. Now, of course, the science and physiology behind female genital mutilation and circumcision are different, and but I guess there is some points to the men's with the whole, it takes away their autonomy or whatnot. I will say, though, for any man that wants to go down the circumcision route, as an adult, whether it's due to complications, personal choices, or whatever, the recovery time, the process is a lot longer and arduous. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if there is any medical benefit or risk factor for the circumcision. That's something, I guess, a conversation I would explore if I was having some child, some boy, and I would actually want to take some thought into it. There's got to be some reason that it does happen. But again, that's probably where they have the most sympathy, but it's so tainted by the extremists. And it just seems that there are extremists in every group, whether it's feminism, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, whatever. There's always going to be extremists that taint the cause. And it seems like the media is really good at just focusing on those extremists to discredit the whole movement. But the thing about men's rights activists is it seems that those extremists, because maybe they don't have men's rights activists, don't have a national platform or anything like that. They can only meet online, which is such a juvenile leaning, a juvenile skewed space, that they're going to have these unnuanced takes. They're going to have these juvenile grievances. Again, lack of access to dating or sex can be frustrating, but you can't equate it to the historic discrimination of women in the workplace, the domestic sphere, whatever. You can't compare it. But I would say if men's rights activists want to find success, they need to probably drop the blanket group, instead of just trying to focus on like men's rights as a whole, because again, it's like, what right are we lacking as a group? But I would say instead, focus on those specific issues that they're upset about and maybe splinter off in those smaller groups, instead of just being homeless shelter, being a men's rights activist who, thinks that homeless shelters discriminate against men and that there's the false rape accusations that destroy men's careers and that education is skewed against women. Instead of combining all those into one thing, I would probably just try to create coalitions or groups based on each one of those specific issues. Men against homeless, the advancement of men in education, try to promote and champion those ideas, those groups, because those are how you're really going to solve these issues, is not by complaining that society, that women aren't doing enough. And again, this is a very basic outline. I don't have enough time to go over everything about men's rights activism because, again, it's you can cherry pick so much to either make them look good, to look bad, and they're not really either. I just think that overall, the group as a whole has some pretty good ideas, but it's just so large, so fractured, so unfocused, and the base that really supports it don't have always the most genuine motivations. And let's just be real, in a whole, women are better at organizing, it seems, than men. Again, it seems like men are just so focused on being individuals. You can't blame society for not catering to each individual. Just like anything, as a group, you're going to be stronger. Society, the status quo, wants men to be weak, wants men to be individuals so they can't band together and create some great things for their community. But fight that urge. Get to know one another. Start projects. I know it is easier said than done, and I'm by no means practicing what I preach. One day, I hope to get the courage. This is what I'm trying to help build towards. But we just need to keep moving the needle in a positive direction. Ignore the negativity, ignore the extremism, and just keep working towards a better tomorrow for both men, women, and just everybody. This is Media Philosophy, exploring the deeper side of entertainment.